Yo, you're watching the Screaming Fish here, people, and once again, I'm here with another video game review, and this time we'll be taking a look at Ratchet and Clank for the PS4. So, Ratchet and Clank for PS4 is a platformer shooter game developed by Insomniac Games and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. I like the Ratchet and Clank franchise. The first three games are arguably some of the best platformers ever made, and the same could be said for most of the future games. Admittedly, I'm not a huge fan of the franchise, mainly because while Ratchet and Clank All for One had a good idea behind it and I enjoyed the story, the gameplay was quite frustrating at times. Into the Nexus was a bit too short, though still it was pretty good. And Q-Force was just horribly executed. So, when I heard they were reimagining the first game alongside a movie, I was pumped and really excited. I couldn't wait for this to happen. So, then it happened, and I must admit, I had mixed feelings coming out of the movie. It was basically all the cutscenes meshed into 1 hour, and half the movie, and it just felt really rushed. It just rushed through everything, and it didn't even give time to get into detail of certain things or characters and stuff like that. However, the game is completely the opposite of what I just said about the movie, because the game is fantastic. So, first off, the gameplay. This has got to be the best Ratchet and Clank game, gameplay-wise. The combat was really, really fun. The weapons have never been more creative, imaginative, and awesome than they are in this game. I must admit, the pixelator is a definite personal favorite. I mean, it literally pixelates the enemies and turns them retro. That's just awesome. Like, returning weapons like the Combuster and the Warmonger are also just as fun to use on your enemies as they were in the previous games. Every weapon is just as fun to use as the last. I'm not even kidding. No, seriously. Somebody just say that using a gun to turn your enemies into sheep isn't fun. I actually found the wrench was actually an effective weapon in this game, because in the previous games, I found Ratchet's wrench to be completely useless against most enemies, but in this game they actually make the wrench effective against enemies and not just a tool to solve puzzles with and do absolutely nothing else with it. After the first few missions of the game, yes, I'm looking at you, Ratchet and Clank, size matters. So yes, I really like using Ratchet in the game, who is brilliantly voice acted by James Arnold Taylor, and I will say that he is the most likable character and most interesting in the game. I also really like using Clank. He was fun to play as for the most part, and he was also a likable character and an interesting character. I will admit, solving the puzzles can get really frustrating at times, and I did find myself going on YouTube to see how other players solve them. I know that's sort of cheating, but I couldn't resist. I also found the puzzle solving with Clank to be quite repetitive, unfortunately. Yes, all the puzzles are sort of different, but you're basically playing the same mission 2 or 3 times in a row, but thankfully they are not a huge part of the game, so I was able to look past that the frustrations of it all. The platforming, as usual, is also great, and I did not encounter a single glitch when playing the game. I also fairly enjoy the side characters in the game. For example, Captain Quark is amazing in this game. Jim Ward's, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Jim Ward's voice performance is brilliant. I actually found Quark a more compelling character than he was in the previous games, while at the same time still managing to maintain his comedic charm and having the whole story of the game be told through his eyes was also a really nice addition, and it was also hilarious. Other side characters like Alaris or Cora were also good additions to the mix. And while admittedly the voice cast for this game, this includes the movie, is pretty amazing. I mean, John Goodman is in this flipping game. Flipping John Goodman, who also gives a great performance as Grimmoth. Paul Giamatti's voice as Chairman Drek in this game just steals the show for the most part. And while it did take me a little while to get used to the more comedic element the developers have given the character, I did end up growing a liking to him, and he ended up being quite an entertaining villain. And speaking of villains, the game has some really cool boss battles, particularly Mrs. Zircon. While they can be frustrating hard at times, they are still really enjoyable and fun to play. So, The game's animation style is also amazing. At times, I thought I was playing an interactive Pixar game. I'm not even kidding. That's how good it is. The visuals are also incredible. Pretty much adding to the point I just made about it being an interactive Pixar game or movie or whatever, or however you want to put it, which is a good thing. The game's visuals are actually just as good as the games like Destiny, if not better. I also had absolutely no problems with the enemy AI. Every enemy responded to my presence the way I would think it would respond, and the game nails that perfectly. There are also different varieties of enemies, which is something I really like, because a lot of the time I was playing this game, I realized that a lot of the time, a lot of the enemies looked different from each other, and they didn't always look exactly the same as the other enemy standing next to them. And if you ask me, that's a pretty cool thing to do with a video game. The side quests in the game were also really fun. Not only were they fun to play, but they also brought me back to the days when I was playing Ratchet and Clank 3, as well as introducing old characters back into the franchise that haven't been seen since Ratchet and Clank 3. Also, the hoverboard races were just really fun and entertaining, and one of the best parts of the game, by far. I also have to admit that this game is funny as heck. I was laughing my butt off on nearly every joke, and I'm going to be honest, the game handles its slapstick humor better than the movie does. Another thing that this game does that is also made me kind of sad was it went into far more detail with the story than the movie did. The movie just rushed through everything like nothing was important at all, whereas the game actually takes it slowly and is paced very well and actually takes its time to develop its characters and story, which is great for the game, but sad as well because I really wish the movie had done the same. However, the final third of the story can get a little convoluted near the end, when Nefarious, who is literally a side character for the majority of the story, out of nowhere becomes the main villain and is actually the final boss, and if that's the case, why was Nefarious a side character for the majority of the story? I mean, you could literally cut every scene with Nefarious, replacing him with a different final boss, and the story would still be as coherent and it would make sense, because the guy is literally in this game for about 20 minutes, if I remember correctly. And that's it, which is actually pretty disappointing, because Nefarious is a great character in this universe. I also gotta admit that his involvement is kind of underwhelming. Yes, Armin Shimmerman, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I'm doing terrible with names these days, gives an amazing voice performance, and he was very funny at times. It's just I don't think this is a particularly good interpretation of the character, particularly with the way he looks. I know Nefarious shouts a lot, that's part of his character arc. It's just that he shouted constantly in this game to the point where it just got annoying. In previous games like A Crack in Time, he just shouted once or twice, maybe sometimes 3 times, and it was fine because they did it at the right times. But in this game, he does it constantly, and it got quite annoying. I also don't really like the way he looks. It's basically the robot design with an organic head, and I'm not gonna lie, it looked kind of silly. This is I'm not gonna lie, some of it is due to the fact that I'm more used to the look that the previous Ratchet and Clank games had before this one, because like Nefarious was a robot in most of those games, and I'm more used to that design. But it's not just because of that. I just found him a bit underwhelming in this game, and I didn't really like the way he looked, and it's just not a very good interpretation of the character, in my opinion. But overall, Ratchet and Clank for PS4 is a really good game. It's really fun and entertaining to play, and come on, you gotta admit, pixelating your enemies, turning them into sheep, or just downright blowing them up with insane weaponry and gadgetry is just a blast. Ratchet and Clank PS4 gets a generous 8 out of 10. So, guys, those were my thoughts on the PS4 version of Ratchet and Clank. I do hope you enjoyed this, and I will indeed see you in the next one. Please indeed don't forget to subscribe, like, or follow me on Facebook, and I will indeed see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.